Hello, hello, and welcome to round one of the League Cup being held at the Collector's Store in St. Peters, Missouri. I am Leonard Craft III. I'll be your commentator today. We've got a nice match to start off with at our cup. A invader from the I guess not upper, but the mid part of Illinois, Chris Y, who will be fighting off against Ben B. So we've got a nice matchup here against two powerful but uncommon restricted Pokemon, or at least Chris's is uncommon. The Lunala is something that I think will be an interesting pick in this game. The Roaring Moon is going to be threatening it a lot with heavy damage from its super effective knockoff. The Kyogre on the opposing side is the Calm Mindset that we've seen a lot of Kyogre transition to. It is that Terra Grass as well. The Kyogre will fare quite effectively against the opposing Torkoal. Torkoal does not like using Eruption even into Kyogre and the Sun. So I would say on matchup, Ben has a slight edge, but that doesn't mean too much until we actually see how the match turns out. One of the things I think is tricky for Chris in this matchup is that it seems that the Trick Room mode isn't going to be as strong straight away. A Psychic Terrain angle by using Indeedee and Gallade is not going to be as effective into an opposing team with Rillaboom, and that Torkoal is going to be pressured by the Kyogre. Meanwhile, there's Pokemon like Entei and Roaring Moon on the opposing side that are also tricky. I think probably a big important part of this matchup will be figuring out which Pokemon is Ben going to be bringing. I think that's going to be a key deciding factor in how this matchup goes, because I think just about anything could come here. Maybe not the Landorus, but just about anything else I think could reasonably make an appearance. So we've got a nice match to start off with Lunala versus Kyogre, with Chris versus Ben. Let's see how this goes in round one. So it looks like we've got a lead of Roaring Moon and Entei to start off with against Chris's Lunala and Indeedee-Female. So Psychic Terrain going up straight away. You'd imagine that there's a Kyogre in the back for Ben, given that's a restricted Pokemon. You usually want to bring that. Let's make sure we know what our booster energy boost is. It is that speed booster on the Roaring Moon. Pretty typical there, especially with Roaring Moon having the Tailwind option. Not likely to go for it here, though. Tailwind would not be especially effective against a Trick Room team, and especially because the Roaring Moon and Entei are already likely going to be faster than this Lunala and Indeedee-Female. Although Lunala does have a lot of natural speed, you'd imagine on a Trick Room team like this that it's probably going to be faster than maybe some of the fastest Incineroar, and that's about it. So if Chris wants to, I think Chris can pretty reliably get Trick Room up here. Follow Me could be taking a knockoff incoming. I would imagine Indeedee can survive one of those from a a Speed Booster Roaring Moon, but I am mistaken. The Rocky Helmet deals a bit of chip damage in return, but that Indeedee's going down. That means Entei will be able to get a hit off into this Lunala, breaking its Shadow Shield and making it easier to knock out later in the game. A Sacred Fire lands. Let's see if it gets the burn. No burn, so no residual damage over time, but breaking that Shadow Shield is something that I think Ben is pretty happy about. Trick Room goes up, which is not going to be ideal, but yeah, we see here in the back that Chris has both Ursaluna and Torkoal. Torkoal really doesn't want to come out here. Not only does Torkoal struggle against the Kyogre that could just easily switch in on reaction, but it doesn't want to deal any damage to... it wouldn't be able to do very much damage to the resistances on the opposing side. Both the Roaring Moon and Entei would resist those fire-type attacks, so... Instead, we see Lunala come in. Meteor Beam is pressuring the Entei with a lot of damage. This Entei is holding the Safety Goggles item, so it's not something like Assault Vest or Choice Band, which means it could have the option to Protect. Protect would give it that extra turn to dodge that Meteor Beam, and then potentially could use Terrestrialization to the normal type in order to get around the Moongeist Beam. But the thing that you have to consider in the meantime is this Roaring Moon potentially threatening Lunala with a lock-off, and so we do see Lunala Terrestrialize. That Terra Fairy could be threatening into the Roaring Moon on the opposing side. There is... let's see, is there Terra Blast? There is no Terra Blast, okay. It's just Expanding Force and Meteor Beam. So, Roaring Moon would not have been threatened by a attack there, but nevertheless still Terrestrializes to Terra Fairy, potentially trying to use Acrobatics. Maybe a double target into the Lunala here, but Ursaluna starts off by using Protect, wanting to get its Flame Orb going. Ursaluna is probably the best Pokemon that Chris has in this matchup. There's not any resistances to Facade, so Facade will just do heavy damage into anything that it hits. I think it can OHKO every single Pokemon on this team. There's no Focus Sash. Everything, I think, should go down in one. Meteor Beam will not cause the Entei to go down in one, though, firing off into that Protect. The Roaring Moon can respond now, probably with Acrobatics, but no, just goes for the knockoff into the Ursaluna as well, trying to potentially remove the Flame Orb, trying to catch Chris going a little bit aggressive there. And I'd say Chris is pretty happy about that turn. Takes no damage, although the Lunala did use its Meteor Beam without getting any value as far as damage. The special attack boost is nevertheless going to be pretty important. Expanding Force would likely knock out the Entei if the Roaring Moon was felled first. Roaring Moon could go for Protect here, and that would prevent it from fainting in a single hit. The Entei also is under huge pressure. Ground-type attacks will do heavy damage into it. And I don't think it would probably like taking a +1 Moongeist Beam. It might be able to. We'll have to find out, though. If Facade just lands into the Roaring Moon, that Terrassalization doing no good. The Roaring Moon terrassalizes and faints with no value out of its attack. Expanding Force is going to hit into this Entei. That's probably a 1-hit KO as well. I'd be shocked if it could survive that attack at +1. Yeah, Entei goes down as well. So Chris, I think, getting probably the most that he wants out of this Trick Room. There's only been a few turns of Trick Room, but there have been 2 KOs. Likely Kyogre is going to come in here, but yeah, we see that Landorus as the last Pokemon. Landorus is the more typical Life Orb set, so it can go for the Protect as well. But Kyogre is in a real tricky spot. Kyogre can't really do too much damage to this Lunala if Torkoal comes in, but why even bother sending Torkoal in when you've got probably just 2 knockouts? Facade should pick up the knockout on Kyogre as it is. Even if it doesn't, I don't think Kyogre can fell Lunala back with an Origin Pulse, and Expanding Force should surely get the Landorus. A combination of Facade and Expanding Force will easily get Kyogre, so likely going to see probably a double Protect here. Nope, no Protects. Kyogre's just going down, and Landorus will follow after it. So this Trick Room being extremely oppressive, Expanding Force will easily be able to pick up this Landorus, and that'll give Chris a Game 1 victory. A critical hit to boot to rub it in Landorus' face, saying, haha, you couldn't have survived that anyway, but I'll get a critical hit on top of it just to rub it in. So that was an interesting game. Ben there did not bring the Rillaboom, so that Expanding Force from Lunala was more potent than it otherwise could have been. I would be shocked if we don't see Rillaboom here in Game 2. Rillaboom not only would match up better into the Psychic Terrain that we saw, but also it would fare quite a bit better into the Ursaluna. We saw the Lunala terrestrialize to Fairy. I think if the Roaring Moon is coming, then it's probably going to be doing that a lot, if I had to guess. It's not going to want to take those knockoffs, and it needs to have that defensive typing in order to be able to do that. So, looks like Chris is considering just going for the same thing. That Torkoal, again, though, not especially effective. Even if it got in the endgame there, Torkoal seems like it was kind of just being used for Sun, and that was it. But what other Pokemon might you consider bringing? I mean, Gallade is kind of tricky. Gallade's advantage is that it can use Wide Guard to stop the Kyogre's main source of damage in Origin Pulse. Potentially that will give Chris enough turns, maybe, into Rain to be able to, like, slow down the Kyogre enough so even if the Kyogre sets up multiple Calm Minds, the Lunala will still be able to pressure it in the end because Ice Beam will not do enough to break through. But I think the name of the game there was definitely that Lunala-Ursaluna combo. I think Chris getting that combination set up early without any punish from Ben, besides the Indeedee knockout, I think was just devastating. And we see an adjustment here with the Landorus and the Kyogre. So Lunala's not going to like this. I imagine that Landorus here, having Sandsear Storm, is likely going to be using that with a follow-up Water Spout coming out from this Kyogre. Even if Torkoal was in the back here, Torkoal wouldn't have liked to switch in on this. I'm not so sure that Lunala can actually survive this combination. Kyogre does only know Origin Pulse again, so it's not Water Spout. It's not as strong as it could be. Landorus's Sandsear Storm is a powerful attack, though. So if it does end up not getting Trick Room up, then it could be pretty bad. We actually see here clever play being considered by Chris, that Terra Grass would resist that combination attack I mentioned of Sandsteer Storm and Origin Pulse. So at the cost of the Lunala's Terra type later, potentially against a Roaring Moon in the back, Chris decides, I'm just going to use my Indeedee's Trestleation now. I'm probably getting Trick Room up. And actually, I believe there's an Expanding Force lock as well, so if Expanding Force goes off, then you could get potentially damage and momentum on this turn. So we'll see what happens. Sandsteer Storm does come out. That's going to do some damage to the Lunala, breaking its Shadow Shield. Expanding Force is actually moving before the Kyogre. That's important information that we didn't learn from Game 1, the speed interaction of those two Pokemon. Origin Pulse also is followed up. Indeedee will definitely get this Trick Room off, though. So the Lunala actually there being faster than Kyogre is tricky for Chris. Chris now likely really wants to get that Ursaluna in, so that way it can use Facade, Facade, Facade. Wants to do that as many times as possible. But now you're kind of in a tricky spot. Like, do you want to just go for, like, follow me and just let Lunala go down? Is Ursaluna that good to be able to win on its own in Trick Room? I don't know. So the Lunala can't protect, so if an Origin Pulse is aimed its way, then if it hits, then it will faint for sure. And we saw that there was no Torkoal in the back, to potentially reduce that damage. So Lunala has a tricky choice to make. Does it go down for the sake of momentum? Probably guaranteeing that another Trick Room's not going up. Or do you switch out and try to save your Lunala for later? Tricky choice. Looks like Chris is deciding just to attack. Just saying, yeah, I'm just going to throw some attacks at you. See what happens. Landorus does switch out. So this is more information for Chris. Let's see what comes in here. It is that Rillaboom. So Rillaboom, again, the adjustment from Game 1 that we expected, given how oppressive that Expanding Force Facade combination attack was, this Alluring Voice is going to do very low damage, even with the critical hit, into the Assault Vest Rillaboom. Origin Pulse does miss! It looks like it missed onto the Indeedee, though, so Lunala will be fainted. Lunala going down means that Indeedee is kind of in an awkward spot on the board. It kind of wants to get off the field. It's not in a great spot. You don't really want to go into your Gallade if you're Chris, either. Wide Guard could stop an Origin Pulse, but Kyogre could also just go for a Calm Mind or a Ice Beam here. Both those are kind of threatening. But Ursaluna coming in, it has to protect. Probably also has to switch Indeedee out and back in, so that way the grassy terrain is no longer on the field. One advantage that Chris does have against this Rillaboom is that the Rillaboom is not using the move Wood Hammer. Instead, it has the less typical Drum Beating, which is normally pretty cool with Kyogre. You can lower Pokemon's speed and then allow Kyogre to outspeed and deal heavy damage, but not very useful in this Trick Room environment. So Drum Beating will do slightly more damage than Grassy Glide, but not a ton. We do see the Indeedee switch out. Gallade's coming in now. Ursaluna will go for Protect, and let's see what happens on this turn. I imagine if Ben gets a knockout here on this Gallade, that would be a huge punish. Just a fake out, though, playing it straight, playing it honest, saying, I'm going to make sure your Ursaluna does not move this turn. I have a way of getting through Trick Room without worrying about it. Ice Beam comes out into the Gallade as well. That's going to do some damage, but not a ton. A Freeze, though, into the Gallade means that Gallade is likely off the table as a reliable option for Chris. The Ursaluna will get Flame Orb activated this turn. Potentially could have gone for a Facade into the Kyogre, and potentially Gallade could have gone for an attack into the Rillaboom. Just staying in, not wanting to reset the Psychic Terrain immediately straight away. Ursaluna probably wants to consider Terastallizing. It's going to have to take some hit here. Whether or not that's a Water type attack from the Kyogre, it definitely doesn't want to take that. The Water type attack from Kyogre would just be devastating. Ursaluna being oh yeah, but it can't Terastallize because the Indeedee already Terastallized, so that's actually kind of tricky. It looks like Chris is considering ignoring the Kyogre, expecting a defensive play from it, saying, there's no way you're just going to give me that Kyogre. Kyogre is way too important. Kyogre is recalled, actually, no Protect, but Landorus does come in. Facade comes out. That's going to be a 1-hit KO into this Rillaboom. A little bit of chip damage helping it out, get that way there, but yeah, Gallade has an opportunity to thaw out of that freeze, and it does. So the freeze ending up not being super impactful. The Sacred Sword actually enough to KO the Landorus, so in a roundabout way, the 2 KOs still happen. Both Ursaluna and Gallade here are the offensive powerhouses. That Ursaluna, I think, is definitely the thing that's carrying Chris. Having no resistances to that Facade and no way to weaken the damage of its attack via either Intimidate or Reflect. This Ursaluna has just been going on a tear. Now, it is still tricky for Chris. this Urshifu does have the Terra Ghost option. So a Facade into the Urshifu isn't just free. That would not guaranteed pick up a knockout. However, I think Headlong Rush probably would get it. I think the question then from there is, can Indeedee and Gallade win in an endgame versus Kyogre? I don't know if there's an obvious choice there. Switching into Indeedee and going for a Psycho Cut into another Pokemon would be an option. If the Urshifu terrestrializes, I think it would still survive that Psycho Cut. Kyogre also probably would survive, given that it's a defensive set with Calm Mind and Leftovers. So I don't think there's an obvious play here. Looks like Chris is considering just going for the attacks. There is a terrestrialization coming out from Ben's side. I imagine this is that Urshifu going for the Terra Ghost, trying to catch a Facade into that slot. That would be the only way that Ben could use to get around that damage. But no, Chris covers that option, going for the Headlong Rush. The important question here is, well, it would have been, does Headlong Rush KO? That would impact whether or not Psycho Cut dealt damage to the Kyogre or not. It does survive the Headlong Rush, but I think the Gallade did target into that Urshifu. Yeah, it did. A knockout into the Urshifu here. Very important. The critical hit not being nearly as critical as the targeting of that Psycho Cut. Kyogre whipping its Protect. If it got an Origin Pulse off there, potentially this could have been a game, but now it's going to be real tricky. How do you get through this remaining turn of Trick Room, and then how do you get through another Trick Room being set up? I don't think that Kyogre is going to be able to actually knock out Gallade in a single hit. Even if you manage to stall out all the remaining turns of Trick Room, I don't see how you're going to stop the Gallade from getting a second Trick Room up, short of a second freeze. The Trick Room does wear off, so I guess you've got that going for you. But again, like, what stops just Protect and Trick Room? What stops? Yeah, I don't see it outside of an Ice Beam freeze. If this Ursaluna can come back in Trick Room and deal that last bit of damage to the Kyogre with Facade, then I think it's going to be over. It looks like Chris is considering bringing the Indeedee on the board, likely not to not to reset those defense drops. You can use Protect and Trick Room to get that up, but instead putting this on the field, I think guarantees that Kyogre is going to be recovering less HP over time from the grassy terrain, meaning that the damage that will be done will be that much more permanent. Kyogre does go out for that Origin Pulse, misses again onto the Indeedee. If both of those attacks had connected, then it probably would have knocked out the Indeedee in the end there. But instead we see Gallade survive the attack, and that's the important one. Being able to survive that attack means that I imagine a Helping Hand Psycho Cut is probably enough to pick up this Kyogre. And even if it's not, Ursaluna should be able to come in and win this endgame, I'd imagine, unless there's a lot of Protects. The disadvantage of switching into Indeedee is that it does mean the if this Gallade does miss the KO and the Kyogre like stalls out a lot of turns in a row, then maybe there's a shot to come back, but it's going to be real hard. The Kyogre would have to get off 2 Origin Pulses into this Indeedee, I think, to pick up that knockout still. So it'd have to use one of those Origin Pulses like now. Pick up the knockout on Gallade, and then probably protect the rest of these Trick Room turns. A Helping Hand does come out. Psycho Cut will damage this Kyogre for heavy damage. We'll see how much it does. With all the multipliers, Kyogre goes down. So Kyogre, not able to withstand the second Trick Room, means that the game and set goes to Chris for round 1 of this League Cup here at the Collector Store in St. Peters, Missouri.